Good morning and welcome. We are in the live mobile marketing and social media webinar, and I am very excited. I'm Mary Beth McCabe, and I'm the lead faculty for marketing at National University. And today we're going to be talking with our friend Jason Bloomberg. We're going to be talking about digital marketing, and we're going to connect the dots between agile transformation and mobile marketing and social media. So I'm going to start off with a short presentation on what's going on with mobile marketing and social media at National University. And so I'm hoping you can see this clearly. So here we are at mobile marketing and social media. And this is what our classes look like at National University. We use Zoom. You can see that we're attentive and active. And yes, you can major in social media. It's a must for some, say, U.S. News and World Report. Mobile Marketing Essentials is a textbook that I wrote, and it's being used by about 30 universities, including national universities. Becker, Bernie, Hanley, and myself were the authors. And what we teach is a real world example. It's a degree specialization, and the final class is where you build your own mobile and social plan. Students learn all these different social media, and they actually get to participate in online activities such as this one, where they're learning about marketing jobs. Here's our final marketing skills for today's business world. If you want to contact me, I'm happy to discuss any of the opportunities with potential students. So today we are talking with Jason Bloomberg, and I want to just give a small introduction to Jason. His company is Intersect, and they publish what they call the Digital Transformation Roadmap, which I found to be an amazing poster. What his company does is they're an advisory company, and they help digital companies and other companies transform. So Jason is a leading industry analyst. He's published over 750 articles, spoken at 350 conferences, and quoted in the press over 1,500 times. And Jason and I met at the Forbes Leadership Conference in San Diego about a month ago. And I saw him on a panel, and I knew that he'd be very interesting to talk about the disruption in digital and how is that transformation happening. So I'm really interested in finding out more about what's gone on since then, and to kind of dive into some of the business opportunities and models that Jason's seeing right now. I also want to point out there was a follow-up article that Jason wrote after this conference, and I found it really interesting because we tried to find out, how do you get to know your customers, and is that really important? And there was some discussion about that. Do you really get to know your customers? Do you have to listen to them? Or like Steve Jobs did, for Apple, he seemed to know what customers wanted in advance. So there were some interesting points on this panel, and I also, so I read the article and saved it, and if you'd like that link, I'll be happy to send you that link as well. I want to quote one other item from that article. Tamar Elikes, Chief Talent Executive at Atlantic Bridge Capital, wrote, "There are two ways to get to millennials, mobile and social." And since that's what we're teaching in our classes at National University, I thought it would be a good way to kind of kick off and talk about this today. So Jason, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit more about your company, and perhaps talk about your business model.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mary Beth. So Intersect is an industry analyst firm focused on what we call agile digital transformation. So IT analyst firms are companies, the larger ones include Gartner and Forrester, and we're a boutique firm. We have 2 people. So what the role of the industry analyst firm is essentially to be an expert in the area of focus to provide expertise on the overall growth of the market, both for the end user, the professional, as well as for software vendors. So in our case, we have basically two constituencies. We have an enterprise audience, so we focus on enterprise technology, and we have a large audience. I write for Forbes. That's one of the things that Mary Beth was mentioning. My colleague writes for CIO Magazine, and then we also do content marketing as well. So we have a large mailing list, and we do a lot of social media promotion to this audience. So it's an enterprise business-to-business audience. So that's part of the context that I bring to this discussion is, as a company, we're entirely business-to-business. And I know a lot of social media and mobile marketing is focused on the consumer market. So one of the things that I can bring is sort of the business-to-business perspective. So in terms of our business model, we offer content marketing and advisory services to software vendors. So our customers are software vendors. Our audience are enterprise professionals, so both technology as well as business professionals. And as an industry analyst, we are essentially influencers. That is, we serve part of our role is essentially a rethinking of the role of the reporter, but we're not really reporters. We're really more analysts who serve as influencers. So that is what we bring of value to our customers, is marketing services that are focused on content marketing as well as influence, which is partly social media based and partly based on the fact that we have such a large enterprise audience, and it is that audience our software vendor customers want to reach. So we help them reach that via content marketing, which is essentially a type of inbound marketing. So that is also something that we can discuss if that's where you want to take the conversation.
So you've mentioned several times social media and content marketing. Where do they intersect and how are they different?
Well, to give you a sense as to how we work, a customer is likely to hire us to produce one of three different kinds of pieces. So we do white papers, which are about 2,000 words long, typically delivered in a PDF format that our customer can put on their website and behind a registration wall. That is, people have to register to download the white paper. So that's the first kind of thing we do. The second is what we call a brain blog post. So it's a blog post that can go on our website, can go on the customer's website, and then also goes out over social media. So we post it on LinkedIn Pulse and cross-post to LinkedIn groups, and it's also syndicated over the Syscon syndication engine, which is a technical syndication site that publishes maybe 40 or so online magazines, and so our blog posts go out over those as well. And then the third kind of thing that we typically do are webinars, and with a webinar we participate on the customer's webinar, so they invite us as the guest analyst, and so we speak on the webinar, and then the webinar, our customer signs up people, so there's a registration for that, and then it's also recorded, and then we and they can promote the recording as well. So everything we do is promoted over social media, and so this is a key part of our offering as well. So everything we do goes on our website. Everything that goes on our website goes over the Syscon syndication engine. It goes on LinkedIn, both LinkedIn our feed as well as LinkedIn groups, and then also via Twitter. So in the B2B space, really the primary social media venues that we leverage are LinkedIn and Twitter. Facebook, to some extent, we don't do that much on Facebook. We do have an Intellex Facebook page, and we have an automated setup where things that we publish also go out over Facebook. And some B2B marketers find Facebook to be very useful. We haven't found it to be particularly useful for our purposes. So we're really focusing on LinkedIn and Twitter primarily. In terms of all the others, all the sort of the minor ones, we just don't bother with those as a rule. I mean, there's a number of them out there, and they continue to spring up, but it really boils down to those two. So. So that gives you an idea how the content and the social media play into each other. Essentially, social media is a way of promoting and distributing the content.
Okay, so the channels are the social media. The content marketing is the actual writing, the material itself. Is that what you're basically saying?
Right, it's writing the material or presenting the material. So we do a lot of writing, and we also present on webinars. And the webinars, blog posts, and white papers are about 90% of the content marketing we create. The other 10% are a variety of formats. They could be in-person events we're speaking at. They could be podcasts or ebooks or infographics. So we do a mix of other things, but those are the primary offerings. Now,
Okay.
for the enterprise audience, we also do keynotes. So we'll speak, we'll speak at a corporate event, for example, and so we do some of that as well. But that is a relatively small part of our business.
Okay, so we're learning about the model of your business. Now, just kind of taking a larger picture, when you look at interactive communications today, you've mentioned several ways that you're trying to reach people. How has this changed within the last few decades?
Well, I was actually, my history as an industry analyst begins in 2001. And so from 2001 through the end of 2013, I was with another boutique analyst firm called ZapThink. We were also in the enterprise technology space. So we went through the whole business there as well. And really, if you look at the difference between ZapThink's business and Intellix's business in terms of how we reach our market and what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, the big difference is the shift in social media. So with ZapThink, that really predated social media. We were producing analyst reports. That's something we don't do at Intellix. And then we were selling the reports and delivering those online. So we leveraged the web quite a bit. But this was really before Web 2.0, essentially the social web, took off. So we were leveraging the web to distribute content. And we were also doing webinars as well. And we had something that you could call a blog post, although we weren't really using the blog format. So we were doing shorter pieces, but we typically delivered those online as well. So we had a website that essentially delivered a blog as well that we sent out via newsletter. We're still doing a newsletter today as well. So that's one thing I didn't mention. We do have 2 biweekly newsletters that also is a way of delivering the content, and we continue to do that. So newsletters is a common element over the last 15, 20 years. But the rest of social media back in, the 2005 era, we weren't doing Twitter, we weren't doing LinkedIn. Those just hadn't come on the radar at that point. So it was really about leveraging the web and email at that point. And now we're still doing web and email, but we've added these additional channels.
So what I hear you saying is that you're doing all these different things to help your clients get more visibility. I've heard recently, maybe it was about a year ago, that there's so much content, and the amount of content just keeps growing exponentially, but the 24 hours in our day remains constant. So how is one to cut through all of that other content in order to get yours heard?
Well, that's obviously where the influencer role comes in. So on the one hand, we need to be influencers. That is, people follow us, people look for our, recognize our names and appreciate the content. So that's part of it. But fundamentally, it boils down to quality content. The problem with what you're describing, anybody can put up a web page, anybody can blog, anybody can hang out a shingle as a marketer and start generating content, is that there's just a lot of poor content out there. There's a lot of noise, a lot of nonsense. And so to rise above that, you really need to write high quality content. So it's important to have very strong writing skills and to understand what the audience is looking for in terms of content. So for example, we don't write traditional analyst content. If you've read an analyst report, they tend to be long and dry with lots of figures and graphs, and they're essentially reference material, but it's unusual for somebody to read a 20-page analyst report from front to back. They're just too dry and too dense with facts and figures to be something somebody would actually want to read in that sort of front to back affair. It's really more of a reference work. So what we try to do is we try to essentially take an editorial tone with everything we write. So we're more likely to write informally, or we're more likely to incorporate humor, and then an editorial tone, that is, we're writing as though we were writing a magazine article, whether it's a blog post or a white paper or anything else we do. That's really part of what we're trying to do, and make it more conversational. And then in terms of the content, really focusing on engaging content, which can be information people don't already have. It can be more controversial. It can drive discussion, and that can be some of the best content. Is essentially the thought leadership content that is content you can't get other places. That's something that is unique to us, that is controversial, engaging, and makes people think. And it's not easy, right? It's not like anybody can just say, just because you can put words on a page, it makes you the kind of writer that you need to be in order to do this.
So if someone's just starting out in marketing today, they're facing this deluge of experts like yourself in order to get in. What 1 or 2 tips could you give to somebody listening now who wants to become a thought leader?
Okay, well, becoming a thought leader is only one of the many ways that you can be successful in marketing. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Somebody, say, right out of college is unlikely to be a thought leader for the first dozen years of their career. It could happen depending upon the niche you carve out for yourself. If you are the expert in some new area, then it doesn't really matter how old you are. But generally speaking, in our case, for example, focusing on enterprise technology, you really have to have been around the block a few times. You have to have a broad understanding of enterprise technology, and of course, there's a lot of different pieces of that. So that's the sort of area that requires somebody who's been along the road of their career a while. So it's less likely to be something a younger person would do. But if you want to focus on some sort of new area, if you carving out a niche in, say, the video game market or some other market that aims at millennials and is fast-paced and dynamic and is more likely to to have that sort of thought leadership aimed at that kind of audience, that would be one way to carve off a position as a thought leader. But keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to be a thought leader to be successful in marketing. I mean, a lot of social media marketing is more about there's other ways of influencing the audience. I mean, the consumer space is very different. I mean, if you have an influencer on YouTube, it's not that they're a thought leader. It's that that everybody watches the stuff that they do, and if they're wearing somebody's clothing, they'll buy that clothing, right? So you don't have to be a thought leader to do that, and you can still be an influencer. But in the B2B space, being an influencer is much more closely tied to being a thought leader. And that term thought leadership as well is one of these slippery terms, because what you'll find is that a lot of the marketers within the organizations that we work with, so the software vendors, they try to get their executives to be thought leaders. And so the marketing person will tell the the CEO or the CTO, well, you should write some blogs and you can be a thought leader. And it's harder than that, right? One, you have to be able to write in order to do that. And two, you have to be able to have something interesting to say that is new, right? That is something that is leadership content, as opposed to content that follows somebody else. And if you think about all the different things you might read in a business context, most of it is somebody writing about what somebody else has already said, right? And I would call that thought follower content. And most of it is like that. So to be a thought leader, you have to be out there sort of blazing a trail, saying something that other people haven't said. And the challenge there is most people who try that just come across as bozos, because they don't know what they're doing, and they just make stuff up. And so you have to separate yourself from that crowd as well, and have, again, interesting, engaging content that makes people think, that people look at and say, well, this is something I haven't seen before, one, but two, this makes sense and is something I'm interested in reading too, as opposed to looking at it and says, this is just nonsense. That's the reaction you try to avoid. Okay,
so I want to get into one of these things that you're talking about right now. And the one thing that I know you're skeptical about, and so this might inspire some discussion, and that's cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin. So I know you've written that it's not something that you were jumping into right now, but would this be a time where someone could perhaps become that expert in Bitcoin? Is there an opportunity for some people to carve out that market right now, or is that already too late?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a joke in in the enterprise circles that, it seems like everybody is calling themselves a Bitcoin expert now. So, and all you need to do to be a Bitcoin expert is buy, a $1 worth of Bitcoin, which is like 0.0001 Bitcoin. And all of a sudden, there's all these people on LinkedIn saying that they're Bitcoin experts or blockchain experts or this kind of expert, that kind of expert. And it doesn't really hold much water, right? Because it's such a new area that even the term expert is, even the people who really are experts are still trying to figure this stuff out. So it's so you sort of have to be careful. On the one hand, yes, if you're good at self-promotion, you can call yourself an expert on something like this, and maybe people will listen to you. But it can be very difficult, since there is so much nonsense out there, to be more than just another source of nonsense. So my perspective on Bitcoin in particular, and to some extent blockchain, is to be the skeptic, and it's a difficult perspective, because everybody flames you. I mean, in fact, I just wrote an article Saturday morning, just 2 days ago, that was my most popular article ever on Forbes by in order of magnitude. I have over 430,000 views on it so far. My next best article is only about 100,000 views, so it's remarkable how much attention it got. But how do you do that on purpose? There's no way of telling. I picked a controversial topic. I took a contrarian view. I had a nice clickbait title, which is helpful, but you don't want to overly depend on the clickbait titles. And then my timing was impeccable this time. I read another Bitcoin skeptical articles that haven't done nearly as well. Why did this one do so well? It was a question of timing, and that's always difficult to get right. So it's a combination of different things. But what I would recommend, if you're looking to be a Bitcoin expert, keep in mind that chances are, if there were 100 of you out there who want to be Bitcoin experts, 99 of you, it would just be a bunch of nonsense, and maybe you're the 100th person who can really get it right. But it's hard to do. What I would recommend is picking an area that the ship hasn't already sailed. It isn't already full of nonsense, and pick an area that is growing, and try to hit that curve as it's ramping up. Because that's, it's much easier to be an expert on something that people haven't been talking about, but start talking about after you're in, right? So you want to be one of the early people talking about an area, and so it's a bit of there's a bit of a gamble, right? How do you know some area that isn't what everybody's talking about is going to be? And it'd be great if we had a way of doing that, but if there was an easy way of doing that, then everybody would do it, and then it wouldn't work anymore. So there's a bit of luck involved. But Bitcoin, the ship has already sailed. Blockchain, the ship has already sailed. It's going to be hard to position yourself as an expert if you're not already known in that area. But there's plenty of other areas that haven't sailed.
Well, I'd love to hear more about those. And just as my own personal experience, in 1993, I left a career in television advertising sales in order to join the digital revolution, and sold the very first banner ad that I know of before the web was even out there. So I had commercial clients in advertising in 1993 that were, spending money on the internet, which now it's that was 25 years ago, my first year in business as a marketing agency. And then I've watched the transformation. We went from zero to a total loss of the business, and changing. I shifted to another kind of a pivot to Hispanic marketing, and been doing that for several years. And now kind of the digital is what I'm really focused on with this mobile marketing and social media that I've been talking about today. So in the Bitcoin, we did an event last week, sold out. Couldn't hold any more bodies in the room. And there was quite a lot of discussion. We could have talked for several hours longer about how this was changing the business economy, not just the currency, but smart contracts and other types of things. So could someone perhaps be an expert in one of those segments, or do you see other opportunities?
Well, I mean, there's always the possibility, and this is perhaps a good time to get into one of these blockchain market segments. Keep in mind, though, it's all sort of future looking, right? It's not like anybody really has blockchain up and running in any, scaled way, right? It's all just experiments, and there's a lot of nonsense on that side as well. And by nonsense, I mean not just marketing nonsense, just people just making noise, but there's also a lot of scammers out there, and so you have to be really careful, because there's a lot of criminal activity that is sort of just prevalent across the board.
That's where it all started. But there were people in this audience talking about healthcare and a lot about the finance opportunities.
Right.
And so
they're talking, but they're not doing yet.
Yeah.
So what I like to say is it's in the teenage sex phase, right? Everybody's talking about it, only a few are doing it, but nobody's doing it well.
Well, let's switch gears for just a second here and talk about the role of mobile and social, okay? And how that digital transformation is happening. And if there's any questions from our audience members, please raise your hand and we'll address those as well. So you're talking about digital transformation. What's that all about? Can you give us your own words on what do you mean by the digital transformation?
Okay, so now we're essentially shifting the conversation from what Intelisect does in terms of providing marketing services to our software vendor clients in the enterprise space, and now we're shifting to what we talk about in the context of our research, which is digital transformation. So what we're really talking about here is shifting the perspective on the customer. So the customer preferences and behavior now drive enterprise technology decisions end to end, and this requires an organizational as well as a technological shift for, in particular, the enterprises, large companies and government organizations, although it really impacts companies of all sizes, but our focus is the larger companies. So it's technology empowered, right? It's because we now have mobile technology and other technologies that we're able to do this, but it's customer driven. So it's because customers, whether they're consumers or B2B customers, want to use new technology touch points and new technology-based modes of interaction with the companies they work with. It's because that's their preference that the companies have to step up to the plate and change not just their technology, but their entire organization. So in terms of the marketing customers do, that is part of now this end-to-end reorganization. Digital transformation is transforming the role marketing is playing in enterprises as well as everything else they do.
Can you give us an example of what you're facing right now in that transformation? Maybe a client experience, a case study?
Well, I mean, I guess before we get to some examples, it would be good to sort of put a little, meat on the bone. So, for example, there's an increasing focus on the customer journey, and you've perhaps talked about the customer journey.
Absolutely.
And so the customer journey, which I really like to say is the digital journey, because it's more than just customers. It's really any individual. It could be a customer, employee, partner, supplier, really any human being interacting with a company. So the digital journey now is not just about a particular phase of the interaction, so pre-sales or making a sale or post-sale support or cross-sell or upsell. It's really about the full lifetime of interactions. And it's driven by the customer at the time and place the customer desires. And again, customer being sort of shorthand for any of these different roles that people might be in. So instead of the company saying, well, this is how we're going to find customers and sell to them, it's up to the end customer to say, well, this is when and how I want to interact with a company. And the reason why this is now practical is because we all have supercomputers in our pockets. We can pull them out anytime we want and interact with a company when and where we choose to. And as a result, companies need to respond to this new way of looking at these interactions. So one of the things that's really important here is that this customer journey cuts across the organization. It's not just part of the role of marketing or just the role of the web team or the mobile team or even the customer service team. It touches all parts of the organization. So it touches back office functions, and it touches customer support and the technology supporting customer support, and it touches all of the other aspects of how companies serve their customers. So what's happening now is instead of having front office and back office separate, where front office is focused on customer interactions, so that would include sales, marketing, customer service, and then back office including, you know, finance and manufacturing and other things that, depending upon the nature of the business. Well, it's now end to end, and these are all aligned with the customer and all participating in the customer journey. So as a result, marketing is no longer responsible for, you know, driving communications, or is no longer solely responsible for driving communications with the customer. That is now something that anybody and everybody in the organization has to step up to the plate to be responsible for. So it's still a marketing function, but it may be the role of an executive, it may be the role of a customer service rep, it may be the role of a salesperson, right? So essentially everybody and anybody is a marketer, and the marketing function is now spread out across the organization, along with many other functions in the organization. So it's a rethink of now what it means to be a marketer in a large company, and how the whole organization has to understand this new role marketing plays in terms of the broader customer journey focused interactions with the individuals that companies interact with. So that sort of gives you sort of that big picture.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that either one of the two are true. Either marketing now has a much larger role and is responsible for all of the communication, or it's watered down and has less of a role in the overall enterprise. No, which of those two?
I wouldn't say is anything is being watered down. What I'm saying is that
spread out.
Well, it's spread out in the basically the marketing function is even more important than it was before, because now it's part of the overall digitally transformed organization. So that doesn't mean you can't pay attention to marketing, and it doesn't mean that marketing expertise is any less important. What it means is that we can't think of marketing as an organizational silo anymore. The same way we can't think of any other parts of the organization in a siloed way. So we're not singling out marketing. It's just we happen to be talking about marketing on this conversation. But really, we have to break down all of these organizational silos and rethink how we're meeting customer needs. And we'll end up with self-organizing teams that are cross-functional and assemble themselves out of individuals with different expertise in order to meet these end-to-end needs of the organization. So instead of having, you know, marketing teams doing marketing in the marketing department, you'll have cross-functional teams of which some people are better at marketing than others, focusing on customer journey related challenges that meet the strategic goals of the organization. So, and all of those have to be aligned with the marketing goals of the organization, as well as all the other goals of the organization. So marketing now becomes more of a community of expertise, more so than a separate department, because we want to avoid separate departments as a way of thinking about how to organize our companies.
Can you give us some examples now? We put some meat on the bone there.
Okay, so one of the interesting shifts that happens when an organization gets a handle on this digital transformation is, in a way, they become a software driven company, even though they weren't in the software business. So an example I like to talk about is JLL, somebody you might not have heard of, but JLL is has traditionally been a commercial real estate management company. So they manage office buildings, for instance, around the world, and you've probably been in JLL managed buildings without even knowing it. Well, now they think of themselves as a software company, because instead of just managing office buildings, what they found is that it was about creating software that helped their customers and their partners, so essentially their whole channel, manage buildings. And so it became more of a software-driven effort, or a software-empowered effort based upon customer demands. So instead of customers, being now the office building owners looking to JLL for services, they're looking to JLL now for a range of digital services. So software-based as well as human interaction-based services. So that changes the nature of the business. So now they're becoming more of a software company, or a software-empowered company that puts them in greater greater alignment with customer needs. So that now it basically informs the marketing they do as well, because they're communicating their value to their prospects and customers, and now it's tied into this new context of their organization as a software empowered company. So so it's less about just talking about why bring in JLL to manage your office building, and it's more about the overall value proposition, which is now an end-to-end value proposition. So that sort of gives you an example.
Can we take a look at their website? Do you think we'd find some of that examples right now if we took a look at it?
I'm not sure. I haven't been there for a while.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try that out. Okay.
Well, who knows? Yeah, we'll see.
Let me jump on in and see if I can get to their website, and then
I did write an article about them several months back, so you can at least go to that.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, and then see if we can jump in and take that step. And they're just called JLL.
JLL, yeah. I'm not sure if it's JLL.com or not, but if you Google JLL, I'm sure it'll come.
All right, let's see if we go. Can you see this?
Let's see. That's the one, yeah.
Okay, so they're talking about change, government taxes, their sliding scales, talk about the future of work. And let's see what they...
Yeah, future of work, this is a great example. I mean, you wouldn't think that managing real estate is about the future of work. Right, but thinking of the future of work is essentially a customer-focused perspective on commercial real estate. It's a whole different way of thinking about commercial real estate.
So let's see what they list as their services, okay? They've got 3 categories, if you're following me: tenants and corporates, investors, and technology. So
right. So they still do the traditional stuff, lease administration, things like this, but essentially the technology is part of their digital transformation effort, the fact that they now are essentially a technology company. And even the first column, those are going to be technology-based offerings, right?
Okay, so the first column is kind of a combination of the two, and the second is investors, and then the third, this is kind of a suite of new products with software at the core.
Yeah, I don't know how new they are, but yeah, generally speaking.
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting example. Thank you for sharing that. I think that our audience would be very interested in knowing more about that. Is there another company perhaps
And JLL is also a business-to-business example. And so I just have a sense, since you focus a lot on mobile as well as social, that a lot of your students are thinking about consumer-oriented marketing. So it's good to sort of see some of the differences with business to business, right? This isn't the same sort of thing you would see if you went to a consumer brand, right? You see something very different with a consumer brand.
Absolutely. One of the things that I often discuss with my students is the fact that the economy of business to business is so much greater than it is with business to consumer. And that's because of the different levels on the supply chain. Business to business is just much, much larger than business to consumer.
Yeah, larger in a sense of, dollars, and how big the companies are. But keep in mind that essentially the buck stops with the consumer, right? So business to business, you'll serve some other company at the end, but who do they serve? And maybe they serve another business. Who do they serve? And eventually you end up with a consumer. Right. And if you think about it, we're all consumers. Every single person on this planet is a consumer. So, and every one of those sort of business to business sequences ends in the consumer. So there's the consumer, and when we think about the consumer, it's more than just the person buying something, but also really the human being in all the roles, whether they're employee, their partner, their supplier. That human being is now driving this transformation. So even in the business to business space, we're still thinking about the human being. And a lot of the transformations are often internal at these organizations, where they're rethinking how they serve their own employees. And the employee essentially is a type of customer in that context.
Excellent. Can you give us another example besides JLL? That was a really good one.
Well, here's one that is consumer oriented. I recently spoke to the CTO of Neiman Marcus. So Neiman Marcus, on the one hand, they're a retailer, and we all know that the retail business essentially has been Amazoned, right? It's very difficult for any department store to survive. So Neiman Marcus has that challenge. But then they are also a luxury retailer. So they're in that particular luxury niche. And if you think about the luxury niche, the department store luxury retailer, so there's Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom and a few others, they've always had the personal touch, and they've differentiated themselves with a personal touch with their customer. So now the question is, well, for those kind of retailers, the luxury end of the market, how can they maintain and hopefully expand that personal touch in the world of both digital transformation and in the world of Amazon, pressuring the entire industry? And so they're doing some things that other, we've talked to Nordstrom, and so all of these retailers are doing some certain things. For instance, a better technology in the stores, in terms of personal shopper technology and sizing technology and other things like that. And then social media is a key part of the story as well, in terms of interacting with customers. So email and text and social media interactions with customers when they're not in the store. The other key part of the retail story is omnichannel, so bringing together the different channels into a single channel, so people who want to leverage their phones when they're in the store, for example. And what's interesting now about Neiman Marcus that is different from some of these other retailers is how they're using artificial intelligence to improve the value of their sales associates. So one of the key elements of an omni-channel strategy is it's not just about the technology that the customer has, it's also about the technology in the store, including the technology the sales associates have. So in the case of Neiman Marcus, because they've always had this personal touch, what this CTO is describing to me is that each sales associate essentially throughout history, right, over the last several decades, has had relationships. Each one can have a personal relationship with, say, 10 or 20 customers. So 10 or 20 of their best customers, they know them personally, they know what they like, they know when they come in, they can email them or text them or send them handwritten notes because they have this personal relationship. And that personal relationship is what that particular customer segment really appreciates, and why they would go into a Neiman Marcus and spend a lot more money as opposed to ordering the same thing on Amazon for much less. It's because of that personal interaction. So what artificial intelligence enables a sales associate to do is expand the number of people that they have a personal relationship with. So now if a customer comes in that they may not be as familiar with personally, as long as they can identify that customer, which could be via multiple means, that now on the device that the sales associate has, they have some of this additional context. So maybe birthdays or anniversaries or buying habits or communication preferences. Do they like getting texts or emails or personal notes? And what are the various things they buy? Do they also get their hair done? Do they also get their nails done? Right. So when they're in the store, and so having that information now enables the sales associate to know 50 or 60 people at that personal level that differentiates Neiman Marcus from their competitors. So that's an example in a more of a B2C space, but in a particular niche.
So are you saying that they have a tablet with them when the customer walks in the store and they push a button and they all of a sudden know all the things about that customer right there on the spot? Is that kind of the scenario?
Presumably a tablet, but it could be a phone, or it could even be a fixed a device. It doesn't really matter. The choice of device isn't really what's important. What's important is that you're providing that sales associate with the flexibility, right? So it's more about letting the associate choose the device. Now with Neiman Marcus, I don't know if our conversation, I don't know if you actually mentioned the type of device, but generally speaking, it's not about the type of device. It's more about empowering that associate.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Those are two really good examples. So we talked about digital transformation. We talked about the customer journey, which I really prefer instead of the funnel, which everybody seems to want to talk about.
The funnel is only part of the journey, right? Because the end of the funnel is the conversion, right? The actual sales activity. The journey continues for the full lifetime of the relationship between a company and its customers. So the funnel is only part of the journey.
Yeah. So we talked about the different levels of marketing. How is the role of marketing changing from what you see from your chair today? What do you see as far as the digital transformation of marketing? Where's that headed?
So, I've talked about some of the organizational changes and how marketing is becoming a set of capabilities that more than just the marketing department need to have. But to add to that, the role of marketing is becoming much more technology empowered as well, right? So, I remember back in the day, back in, I guess, the 90s, before the web came along, marketing was what you did if you weren't smart enough to do something technical. So it's like, oh, you dropped out of computer class. Okay, well, you can be a marketer. Well, it's not like that anymore, right? Marketing requires every bit as the level of technical expertise as some of these more historically hard skills, right? So you don't think of marketing as a soft field anymore. It's a hardcore technology empowered field now, and the sorts of technology tools that marketers have to work with can be very sophisticated. So understanding demographics and understanding attribution. Attribution is an area that technology has really risen up. Has really risen to the challenge, and it empowers marketers to be much more shrewd about how they spend their money. So essentially, attribution is, if you have a marketing dollar, you can spend on a lot of different things. You want to know which ones are paying off for you, right? So if you spend, so you have a certain marketing budget and you have a certain result. Well, which of the things you spent money on led to that result? So if you spend your marketing dollars on 12 things and you see, twice as much sales during a promotional period, well, was it the website? Was it the texts? Was it the, social media? Which social media? Was it the Facebook promotion? Was it the, this and that? Right? That's the attribution challenge. Well, it's a very difficult technological challenge to give the marketer that level of visibility. So it's a very data-centric, data-rich set of challenges. And so some of the software vendors that we're working with are essentially the marketing automation and marketing technology vendors who are helping either with attribution or with many of these other sort of slices of the marketing technology pie. And the whole marketing technology area is just exploding. So there is enormous complexity, but also enormous value that is now being brought to the marketer's table. So for those of you who picked marketing because the computer stuff was too hard, sorry. you pick something that's every bit as hard as the computer stuff, because it is computer stuff, right?
Yeah. We've seen the MarTech stack grow to levels that are
exactly.
kind of just it's too much to even try to explain sometimes. But so now IT is spending more money in marketing than before. Marketing is spending more money in IT than before. Do you have any benchmarks? Any advice for future marketers? Where should they be focused? Or is there any kind of guideline that you'd recommend?
Let's see. Well, we don't really do benchmarking per se, but in terms of guidelines of what you should be focused on, that's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I guess understanding this digitally transformed context for business is important. So understanding that if you bring marketing skills to the table and you start working for a large company, for example, again, just because we focus on the large companies, that you may not end up being in a traditional marketing role. That is, the marketing skills you bring to the table could provide value in many different roles, and the notion of a particular role in an organization is also shifting, where the smarter, as in the digitally transformed organizations, are really hiring for diversity and cultural diversity and expertise, both technical as well as organizational. And so it's about understanding the role that marketing skills have within that context. And that's becoming increasingly important as well. So that's part of the story. Now within the software industry itself, those are our customers. that marketing is an important role as well, and there continues to be great opportunities there. The people that we work with, the marketers that we work with, so these are the B2B software marketers. I mean, it requires quite a level of expertise in order to play in that role as well, and there are a number of opportunities there, and if anything, that is a growth area. So if you're looking for where the opportunities are in marketing today in the software as well as the hardware world, but we focus primarily on the software, there is a lot of opportunities there for people who have the marketing skills but also understand enough of the technology to communicate well about the technology. And so there's the marketing communications, product marketing roles. There's a variety of roles in the marketing world in this kind of business.
So tell us a little bit about how you personally got to where you are. Were you in a marketing role? Were you in a sales role? Were you in a technical role? And how did that help you in your journey?
Well, my background is more technical than marketing or sales. I mean, you got into the web in '93. That was a bit before me. I got into it in '95. So I was building websites in '95. And, in 1995, that was the early days of the web as well. And it was a whole new area. It was sort of the first wave of what we call today digital transformation. But obviously, we didn't use that term yet. It was really more the rise of the web and then became the whole .com phenomenon. So I rode that wave and, built websites and then did more consulting. I worked at a bank for a while, helping them get their online banking up, and I worked at a software startup for a while. I worked in what we called web consulting as well. So I was in a consulting role, and that's really when I decided to switch to being an industry analyst about the time of the .com crash. So sort of the way, my first sort of job after the .com crash and sort of things, the dust had settled a bit, was as an industry analyst. And so an industry analyst basically is a way of leveraging the skills you had built in your career to provide this influence level of expertise to a broader audience. So it's an interesting segment of the market, being an industry analyst, and it made sense given my role as a web consultant after there was no, for a while after the .com crash, nobody wanted web consultants anymore, so you had to do something different.
So with that background, with the technical background, with all these different roles that you've played, what are some tips that you might give marketers for tomorrow? Where do you see that they need to do?
Oh, that's a good question. So, generally speaking, so we're sort of now expanding the lens, B2B and B2C, sort of the general question. I mean, it is important to understand the shifting role of marketing. It's important to understand the increasing technical requirements of marketing. And I would say the one thing that we haven't talked about really is understanding the ebbs and flows of social media. One aspect of social media that you may or may not be aware of, depending upon how long you've been focusing on it professionally, is that it's fad driven. Right, something will be popular for a few years and then it'll go away. Something else will be popular, and there's no reason to expect that to change. Right, so we saw MySpace was big and then it went away, or there were other blogging. The first blogging platforms were big and then they went away, and then something else came along and then it went away. And and so today, we talked about LinkedIn and Twitter, and on the consumer side, we might be using Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook. And it's like, so those are the big five. Are those going to be the big five in 5 years, 10 years? Probably not. Right, but who knows what will be different? Will there be new ones? Probably so. What will they do? I have no idea. Which of the ones today will fade the way MySpace faded? Who knows, right? I mean, when in MySpace's heyday, it looked like the biggest thing since sliced bread. I mean, there was no way of telling that MySpace was going to crash and burn as quickly as it did, right? And will Facebook crash and burn that fast? Probably not, but who knows? Right, and it's just hard to say. So I guess that's one of the things to keep in mind, is particular about the social media, which I know everybody's focusing on, is that you have to be very nimble right? You have to realize that it's less about the platform and it's more about the human interaction. And if one platform becomes less popular, then another one will take over. Now, if you're focusing on, the younger demographics, you're focusing on teenagers. Teenagers get tired of stuff on purpose because if you've been using it for too long, it's just not cool anymore. Right. So, I talk to my kids aren't even teenagers anymore. That's how old I am. They're in their 20s. If you're a parent of teenagers and you talk to your teenager, well, do you still use fill in the blank, Instagram or whatever it is? It's like, no, mom, no, dad. That's so yesterday. I used something, and they'll name something you haven't heard of, even though you're in the social media industry. Well, that's going to continue to happen. Right, where the teenagers are tired of what everybody else is using and are using something nobody's heard of. That will always be the case, and it will keep turning over and over and over again. So by the time those teenagers now get into the workforce, they'll be looking for a different set of tools than the people just 5 years older have been using, and then that will continue to sort of churn up everything because it's just very fashion-driven. It's very fad-based, and that's something to keep in mind. It looks like Facebook is here to stay. Don't bet on it. Well, maybe you could bet on it, but don't bet everything on it.
Are there some social media platforms that are especially good for B2B customers, enterprise customers?
LinkedIn is the leader now. So it has really established its place as the #1 B2B social media tool. Microsoft acquired it, as you know, a few years ago, and in my opinion, Microsoft has improved it. So you won't get 100% agreement on that. There are some, LinkedIn fans from way back thinks Microsoft has been a negative force. I think it's improved, but we'll have to see, right? I mean, Microsoft as a company has transformed itself with, Satya Nadella has really changed the way the company is doing business as compared to the Gates and Ballmer days. That impacts their choice of LinkedIn in the first place, as well as what they're doing for it. So we'll have to see where that's going to go and what Microsoft has planned for it. That's sort of the state of the art today.
Besides LinkedIn, what other platforms are there?
Well, for the B2B space?
Yes.
Well, Twitter has a role, although it's always hard to tell just how valuable Twitter is from the perspective of achieving marketing goals. That is, can you really build a brand on Twitter? Can you really generate leads on Twitter? It's a little hard to tell because Twitter, it's so dramatically ephemeral, right? You tweet and then the tweet goes away in just a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to tell and it's hard to measure, generally speaking, especially in the B2B space. It's a little easier, I guess, to measure in the B2C space, just because if you're a large brand and you're looking at Twitter as one of your channels, there's a lot of data that you can crunch. The B2B space is a little harder to tell. But it's still very popular, and there's still a lot of activity on Twitter in the B2B space. And so if anything, it is a great barometer of how people are thinking, because it is so current and it is so immediate that it gives you that immediate sense. And if you incorporate Twitter marketing, sort of the real-time Twitter marketing, which isn't really something we do in B2B, but it happens in B2C. So, for example, you might see a hashtag appear on the screen in a TV show. So now everybody who's watching in that time zone sees the hashtag at the same time. Well, that sort of immediacy is something that only Twitter can provide. That's not particularly useful in the B2B space, right? We don't put hashtags on TV shows the same way they do. If you're watching Survivor, you'll see, hashtag blindside, and everybody goes and tweets that. And so a marketer can take advantage of that immediate audience to communicate a message. So we'll see. And there's others as well that people use, but we don't have time to participate in sort of the minor ones, whether it's Quora or a number of these others that we at Intellex just haven't used because we're too small a company to we have to pick our battles.
So just some thoughts perhaps on 2018 and what digital transformation we may be seeing next year. Do you have a few predictions for us?
Well, I mean, we mentioned Bitcoin earlier on, and Bitcoin in the broader blockchain world is sort of reaching this point of explosion, right? The balloon is getting so big, and people are blowing in it so fast that it's hard to say what the fallout will be. And I've actually written on this, that there can be secondary fallouts from a Bitcoin crash or other kinds of disruptions in the market. And people are increasingly thinking now that disruptions in Bitcoin and blockchain may impact the broader economy as well. And those are entirely unpredictable. So there could be a number of unpredictable disruptions, whether they're driven by Bitcoin or other things. And I think that's sort of the key question that we have in 2018, as well as just the question about the economic cycle, right? We've been in a boom cycle now for 10 years and it's getting kind of old, right? So and those of us with some gray hair, not to name any names, but if you've been around the block a while, you've seen ups and downs, right? And if you're in your 20s, you may not have seen a down because it's really been 10 years since we've had a recession. Well, it's just a matter of time till we do have an economic downturn, and that will impact the world of digital transformation in ways we may not be able to predict, because so much of the digital transformation story dates from after the last recession. So we saw the same kind of thing happen with the dot-com, right? The whole dot-com boom happened between recessions, and then the 2001 recession hit and took the air out of that balloon, but led to a whole new era of a viable business, and it led to the Web 2.0 that turned into the social media movement. So there's always rebirth at the end of these cycles, right? There are cycles, right? There's down, there's ups again. So I guess that's sort of the big unknown is will we have a downturn? What will that mean, and how will that impact business overall and digital transformation specifically? And then what will the recovery be? What will happen afterward? And that's all a big question as well.
Well, thank you so much, Jason Bloomberg from Intersect. I want to thank you for being a participant and those who were on the call here. Love to hear your feedback. We'll definitely make this available to others, and just want to say again how much we thank you for your participation, and been very interesting to learn about digital transformation and the agile technology that we are in right now and how much is going on. So thank you again.